Hello and welcome to Bespoke Unit. I'm CP and in this video I'm reviewing Żubrówka Vodka. This review has been conducted using the Bespoke Unit liquor formula, a quantifiable review matrix that you can either use at home for your own reviews, or if you don't have the time to watch the entirety of this video, simply head in the description below where you'll find the link to the full write-up of this review, which will provide you with a PDF version of the liquor formula and give you a quick overview of the vodka and its characteristics. Cherished both in Poland and abroad, Zubrowka is said to be made using a 14th century recipe. However, its commercial production actually started only in 1928. It is primarily produced at the Polmos Białystok in Poland. However, sometimes it is also produced in Belarus. As you can see, every bottle has its own individual blade of bison grass. However, this is purely decorative. The way that the bison grass is actually extracted is that it's steeped in alcohol for long periods of time and then filtered to remove any sediment, and this is then introduced into the vodka. It is said to be hand-picked from the Białowieża forest in Poland, and this technically means that Żubrówka is not actually a vodka, but a liqueur. Nevertheless, for the purposes of this review, we're going to call it a vodka. So it's made using a rye base, there's no age statement, no casking. The only additives that I know of is the bison grass essence that is introduced, and you can expect an alcohol by volume of 37.5%. Now, with all that said, let's jump into the actual review. I have a small sample in my glass here, and so looking at it, it has a distinctive lime cordial colour. It's quite faint, but there's this green tint, green yellowish tint. The liquid itself is quite clear overall. You may get a little bit of sediment from the grass, the blade of grass in the bottle, but otherwise it's quite clear. And in terms of viscosity, you're going to get some nice scallops on the side of the glass. It seems to be relatively unctuous for a vodka. And then in terms of the nose, it has a prickly nose feel, but is rich in aroma. Expect some notes of hay, a little softness from the vanilla, and then some aromatics such as rosemary. It's not intense, and it's not overly complex, but it's very balanced and it's harmonious. It's going to give you a lot of aromas, and it's very pleasant as well. Even though it's quite prickly and it does burn, there's a little bit of pepperiness at the back, you're going to get some nice rich aromas. Well, with that done, let's jump into the palate. Overall, a sweet primary flavour. However, it could arguably be umami because you're going to get some savoury notes as well. Its mouthfeel is very creamy. It envelops the palate. For a vodka, it's very rounded and it's very smooth. The opening consists of some lemon zest, a twang of citrus, and then you're going to get some grape, like almost white grapes, and a hint of cinnamon. There's a precursor to the spiciness of the heart. Once you get into the heart, you're going to experience some anise, maybe a hint of cardamom, and then there's what is quite interestingly a note of coconut that adds just this nice sort of rounded sweetness before you finally get to the finish, which consists of tonka bean and rose. It's quite floral, it's much more gourmand at the end, and then it has a nice quite medium to long finish. The complexity is actually much more complex on the palate than on the nose. You do have a nice array of different flavors in the bouquet. The flavor is quite rich overall. It does a nice crescendo from the start to the finish, and it is relatively harmonious. You have good balance. You have a nice spread of weight across the palate. Interestingly, Żubrówka was actually illegal in the USA until recently because the bison grass used contains trace amounts of coumarin. However, a new formula has been made just for the American market. So this is a European bottle that I'm drinking. I don't know if it's exactly the same as what's available to you in the USA. Next, we're going to talk about the overall experience. So Żubrówka has a nice distinctive bottle with a bison which is in a clearing, and you're going to have some text here. In my case, this is in French because I bought it in France. However, I imagine it's different for every language. And you have some medals at the front, which are actually not prizes but relating to the brand itself. Pressed into the glass, you have some extra blades of grass as well as the bison, as well as the logo here. What's quite interesting is you do have this blade of grass inside, which, as I mentioned, is entirely decorative. This doesn't impart any flavor on the drink itself. That is done by adding a steeped essence, which has been processed just for the drink. There's no packaging to the bottle. It comes just on its own. And it's a very versatile drink. This is a great vodka for sipping neat, especially if you're not typically fond of drinking vodka on its own. If you're, for example, hosting a party, or if you're having a special gathering and you're going to have people over who aren't too fond of sipping vodka, especially if you have a Eastern European heritage, this is a great option to have on hand. Meanwhile, in terms of occasion, it is very versatile as well, because you can take it to casual parties, you can even have it on your own, but it fits in quite nicely in formal occasions, given that it is quite an unusual and a unique variety of vodka. This leads me on to the value for money. So you're expecting an RRP in the USA of about 26 bucks, give or take. In Europe, it's going to be around 18 US dollars, or the equivalent of 18 US dollars. In my case, this was 15 euros. And finally, I'm going to talk about the cocktails and pairings, and this isn't scored. This is just a thought exercise that we have at the bottom right-hand side of every liquor formula. It is something that can be quite happily sipped neat. As I said earlier, this is a very good entry, let's say beginner's vodka for those who aren't yet seasoned with having it neat. If you have an aversion to drinking vodka neat, it's a very, very pleasant option. But if you were to integrate it into cocktails, there are lots of different options available to you. For a start, you can use it as a great alternative to regular vodka in different cocktails. So for example, a vodka martini, this is going to add some herbaceous characteristics to your typical cocktail. Otherwise, have it instead of gin in a typical tonic. So it goes very nicely with some tonic water, add a twist of lime, and that's going to really bring out the zestiness in the opening. Alternatively, you can also add it to a Moscow Mule, which is already quite a spicy drink. This is going to add another layer of complexity, and so on and so on. You can use it as a great alternative to both gin and vodka in lots of different cocktails. However, I would refrain from using it from the more gourmand cocktails, such as like a Bloody Mary or an espresso martini. In this case, it might be a little bit too herbaceous. That being said, it's supposed to go very nicely with apple juice, so you could use it in an apple martini. That would be quite pleasant too. Then when it comes to pairings, so first of all, it's said to go very nicely with vanilla ice cream. I would certainly recommend that you try it with other fruit sorbet, for example, raspberry or even lime. If you want to go for something citrusy, this would be a great choice. Or you could pair it alongside seafood. A typical tradition in, for example, some parts of Scandinavia is to have aquavit and seafood like langoustine or crab. You could certainly have Żubrówka instead. That's going to be a nice alternative, and given that many Scandinavian aquavits are quite herbaceous, quite rich in fennel, if you're not too keen on fennel but still want to partake and have something similar, this is a great option. And then finally, we're big fans of cigars here at Bespoke Unit, you may have noticed, and so we've thought of a pairing, and my recommendation would be this Oliva Connecticut Reserve. It has quite a potent profile for a Connecticut cigar. It does have some nutty characteristics, and if you were to have this alongside the Zubrowka, they're going to have similar levels of body, but they're not going to overpower each other. So this would be probably my first recommendation. Otherwise, another type of Connecticut cigar that is quite smooth on the palate would marry well with the Zubrowka. Overall, I admit that Żubrówka is one of my favorite vodkas. I first encountered it in my teens when drinking with some family. It was on a summer's afternoon, and it went down nicely despite the southern French heat. Ever since, I have always had an affinity for it. It's something that I don't often have in the house, but I should certainly keep a bottle just in case of a rainy day. That's all for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and leave us a comment if you have any questions about Żubrówka, or you would like to share your own experiences, or even comment on my terrible pronunciation. I really did try my best. My Polish 101 didn't proved to be very handy in this case, which I did back in university, but never mind. And if you enjoyed this, why don't you check out bespoke.com and see all the other lifestyle subjects that we cover. I'm sure that there'll be something that you will love. Until next time, take care.